Good morning, everybody, and welcome again to this continuation of this very, very interesting and nice conference. Yesterday, so there were many such issues that were taken up, and which I think I could also try to relate to here this time. I think one interesting thing that was like discussed or mentioned several times was this kind of danger of isolation when we have either, let's say, a immigrant group or also an ethnic minority. So if they somehow like become more inwardly looking and maybe they are less related to the rest of society. So will that be like a kind of danger for the integration? And here I think, because today I'm going to talk about civil society. So I would remind us all that we are never integrated into society as something general and abstract. So we are not integrated into something that is society, because something that is society, so it's not one thing. It's a lots of different things. And we are integrated into these institutions that build society, institutions and networks that build society through certain specific institutions and networks in which we are. So, I mean, the network actually, so it could also be one that is mostly consists of, let's say, our fellow members of a certain minority. So, and the question is whether these networks that are the minority networks, whether they are connected to other networks in the society. You know, if you think where you are yourself, how you are yourself integrated with society. So you start with something, thinking about maybe your employer or your family or something. So that's also a particularistic network. And the question is whether your employer or your family, whether that is then well connected to other institutions. Okay, that's as a beginning, and I hope that I will be able to relate to that same issue later. So, civil society, as you can see here, I have something about how I'm going to talk. And I will start about civil society. That can mean two different things. It can mean what we often talk of as the third sector, which is, let's say, those kinds of institutions that are non-governmental and non-profit. So it's something between, or autonomous, both from the state and the market. So it is a kind of sphere of certain kind of institutions with a certain kind of legal states. And we can also talk about civil society as something broader, as kind of different term for democracy, in which when we are using that term, so then we are stressing on the kind of dialogical nature, on the pluralism in the society that is actually a condition for democracy and liberty. So civil society can be kind of also a term for public sphere, understood in the way as, for instance, Jürgen Habermas uses that word, something where there is possibility for debate that informs political decision making. And ideally, as Habermas puts it, so the winner in this kind of debate would be the best argument and not the one backed by privileges of power. So that would be a kind of ideal communicative situation that depicts an uncorrupted public sphere. And we will return to the issue of dialogue. But I will also say something about how it comes that this concept has become popular. So it was, I mean, civil society as such is an older concept, of course, but it became again center of a quite large debate in the 80s, and there were actually like two different reasons for that. One impulse was the development in Western welfare states, where there was the rightist political tendencies, Thatcherism and so on, and there was more call for a reduction of public spending. And it was, in the British context at least, so it was expected that the third sector organizations, so they would be able to take over some of the states or the government's functions in public service provision. And it was also thought that that might reduce public spending. Of course, there later on, when we are talking about third sector as a service provider, so there has come in other considerations to this debate also, that maybe not the saving of public money is the main thing, but also that they will have the kind of, they will bring the planning and administration of services closer to the people who are their main target groups. So they could be valued as service providers not only for cost effectiveness, but for the link that they forge between grassroots experience and decision making. And then another impulse came, of course, from the popular movements both in Latin America and then in Central and Eastern Europe and Soviet Union, that paved way for democracy in in these countries. So we see that they are very different kinds of actors if we think about large popular movements or then like associations and charities and so on and foundations in the West. They can be seen as part of civil society in the way that they are something that is independent of both the government and the market. But of course we see that they are also different. The big popular movements, so they were like putting stress on the unity of the people against an oppressive power. And then on the other hand, so from the Western European perspective, so it's rather clear from the outset that these institutions represent diversity. So, of course, when we think about the democratization in Western societies starting from 1789 or so much of this development has really been about reducing diversity, abolishing estate privileges and unifying citizenries in the emerging nation states and so on, as to their political rights, but also as to their culture and identity. But these unifying tendencies in the democratic rule were already warned about by early commentators. Alexis de Tocqueville was one of the most, let's say, one of those who are most known today. In his book about democracy in America, he warned for these unifying and leveling tendencies inherent in the idea of majority rule. So he used the term free institutions to describe a social sphere where citizens' voluntary associations stand as guarantors against the danger of democracy turning into a tyranny of the masses. And so here we have a quotation. He says that he believes that an aristocracy cannot again be founded, but then private citizens, by combining together, may constitute bodies of great wealth, influence and strength, which then correspond actually functionally to what the aristocracy meant during the Ancien regime. So here an association is a kind of powerful and enlightened member of the community. So the government cannot at will just oppress this kind of community. And when this community defends its own rights, it also saves the common liberties of the country. So here, while Tocqueville recognizes this tension between these two elements that are both important in a democratic state, unity of commitment to a common good and pluralism on interests and opinion, so he does not really see them as antagonistic. So he sees that when these associations, when these diverse interests are being guarded by people, so actually it turns out that they will also defend the liberties essential for the whole society. So we could say that we have here a kind of invisible hand again at work, the invisible hand of civil society, which transforms individual collective actors seek for own gain to common benefit. So quite in the same way as Adam Smith imagined the functioning of idealized capitalism. In the present sociological thought, so we find an analogous line of thought behind the idea of social capital, which Robert D. Putnam has been the major advocate of. So social capital, which is born out of people's ability to work jointly for a common cause. So it also benefits the society as a whole. And the rulers, democratic institutions, when the citizenry is in possession of strong social capital, the institutions tend to be effective and responsive to the citizens' needs. Now, when we think about civil society and integration, so I already mentioned this, that people often tend to network primarily with people of their own kind. And we should remember that none of us is integrated with society generally, just with something that we call society, but always through mediating institutions. And the question is to what degree these mediating institutions then are networked with other institutions. Civil society integrations add to integration through social capital because they empower the people who are participating. They give a possibility of networking, which again can help with finding a job and so on, and helping to participate in a dialogue. And of course, often the problem is that these institutions, maybe the persons who are participating, let's say in a refugees associations, so they are all in the same kind of underprivileged situation. So the networks that they can build through that, so they maybe won't give that kind of social capital that they would need. But of course, then also like the responsibility for the majority society is to try to create bridge with those organizations. And now another kind of type of organizations that is not either conducive to integration is what sometimes has been called as the uncivil society, or also with the abbreviation NIMBY, not in my backyard, where the people often, usually from the majority population, so they consciously try to distance themselves from other groups in society. So in this kind of counteract integration. Of course, it's always difficult to draw an exact line. Where is this? Where we are talking about justified self-interest, and where it's a question of hateful ideology. And now, as the end. So we saw that civil society itself is an expression of diversity and a channel for expressing diversity. And it is also a sphere where these kind of diverse opinions, interests, and identities should meet. And we saw also that there is kind of tension, always potential tension between, let's say, the common good and the particular interests here. And now if we think about a democratic public sphere, so then we need that everybody who's affected by the decisions to be made, so they will be equally participating in the debate. So a dialogue is possible only when there is readiness to accept each other as negotiation partners. Kind of mutual respect, or what Edward Shilts, the philosopher, sociologist, called civility. And of course, you can't expect same kind of civility from all kinds of institutions. Maybe a local association working very hardly for some very local interests. So we can't demand the same kind of, let's say, readiness for negotiation, and as we should then require out of an umbrella organization, or national umbrella organizations. Or if a bikers club, if they are like expressing sexist attitudes. So that is a shame, but it's much worse if, let's say, a member of parliament is expressing sexist attitudes. So it is the closer the participants are to authority and powers, the more should be expected from them as to civility. Civility in order to take care of the integration of our society. So I'm finishing. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much.
Yes.